Welcome to our webinar, Who Needs to Know When and How to Disclose Vision Impairment? My name is Kendra Farrow, and I work for the National Research and Training Center on Blindness and Low Vision, which is located at Mississippi State University. I personally have a vision impairment that I've had my entire life, so I've had some experiences applying for jobs and working with my vision loss. Today, I will be moderating our discussion. We have 3 panelists with us, which we will meet in a few minutes. We will talk today about some benefits to disclosing vision impairment. We'll also talk about some pros and cons for not disclosing vision impairment. And we'll also talk about legislation that governs the fair treatment of individuals with disabilities. Disclosure is a personal choice. Some individuals may choose not to disclose because they don't require any accommodations in the workplace. Each situation is unique, so the information that we share today are from our personal experiences. There's not a one-size-fits-all for what's going to work or what may not work. What's been a good situation for some individuals may not be a good fit in another situation. So just remember that everything is completely unique, and this is not one size fits all. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, was passed in 1990, and it assures equal access for individuals with disabilities. The disability must be disclosed before accommodations can be requested. And this is different than it is for students in school, where they have an individualized education plan that follows the student from grade to grade and class to class. There is not such a thing in the adult world or related to employment. To get an accommodation, the disability must first be disclosed. And the accommodations requested must be reasonable. So benefits for disclosing a disability: that you can request and receive accommodations once the disability is disclosed. Protection from disability discrimination, provides reasonable explanation for perceived differences, and it may help to relieve some uncertainty about how performance might be perceived. So some pros that people might think of for not disclosing a visual impairment: no need to explain their disability. So for some people, it's very uncomfortable and they would rather not disclose. They might also feel that the treatment or expectations are going to be different based on their disclosure. So some cons for not disclosing: there's no explanation for an altered performance or behavior that someone might observe. So for instance, if you need to look more closely at something and they don't understand why, then there's no explanation for that. There's no protection from discrimination. No accommodations will be provided. And the individual may have anxiety that their disability might be disclosed in some uncomfortable way. So to disclose a vision impairment, you should prepare to do it. First, find a concise way to describe the disability. It shouldn't be in such detail that it takes a long time or it's really complicated for someone to follow the explanation. You want to keep it simple and straightforward. Explain the accommodations that you're going to need. Provide examples of things that have worked in similar situations. Determine who the right person is to tell. Practice with a trusted individual. That could be a VR counselor, a family member, or a friend. Select the time and location where you're going to disclose. If you disclose in a job interview, you want to make sure to keep it positive. So focus on how the accommodations are going to help you accomplish the tasks of the job. Now we're going to jump in with our panelists. we have Melissa, Chris, and Jeff with us today. And I will ask them each to introduce themselves, tell us a little about their visual condition and their career paths, and how their vision has affected their ability to work. So let's jump in. We'll go with ladies first. Melissa, would you like to begin with your introduction yourself, a little bit about your vision, your career path, and how your vision relates to all of that?
Okay. Hello everyone. As Miss Kendra had said, my name is Melissa. I was born with a retinal dystrophy. My vision is around 2300, so I'm considered legally blind. I moved from the England to the United States when I was 18, so I went to school in England. And when I moved over here after college, I got into child nutrition at one of the local schools in our area, and I also teach kindergarten children at a local church that I attend. As far as my vision and how it's affected me working, is that kind of what you what you were
Yes.
asking, Miss Kendra, like how it's affected? Well, I mean, I chose early on. I knew that it would be a battle in some ways, but it was a battle that I wanted to, meet head on. I was very open and honest and upfront with, with my colleagues and my boss, and just it helped me because I feel like when you have confidence in yourself, you're just upfront and open, then you can just find that communication is so much easier. And then, whatever needs that you do have, if you have any, I mean, most of the time people are willing to kind of, um, do what's needed. I've never really been one to kind of want any kind of special accommodations. I do just as anyone else in our at our work site would do. But as far as apart from, of course, driving, I have to get away to and from work. But once I get there, I mean, of course, I have to look closer than most people would. But I've always had that mindset of, if there wasn't a way, I would make a way. Because it was really important to me that my children would see that I never let my disability stop me, or hinder me from doing what it is that I wanted to do.
Thank you, Melissa. Jeff?
Hi, my name is Jeff. I have a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. I was diagnosed at age 39, and my condition is basically it affects your night vision at first, then your peripheral vision, and then it gets into your central vision. So I am legally blind, and what I am able to see is I do have some light sensitivity, and I could see kind of shadows or images. And sort of a way I like to describe it is, imagine if you're looking at a jigsaw puzzle with 100 pieces, just imagine about 30 or so random pieces missing. So very kind of a kaleidoscope effect. So it's a kind of condition. It's hereditary. It progressively gets worse, once you kind of hit your around age 40, kind of a standard case, and then it just kind of gets a little bit worse over time. My background in terms of education and employment, I do have an engineering degree, and I actually also have an MBA in finance. So I've worked for a large company for 30 years now, and I've had numerous positions within the engineering field and also within supervision, where I'm currently at. In terms of like when my diagnosis was made, I'd already been with the company for about 15 years. So I kind of had a head start with understanding the business, understanding the company, kind of setting up, kind of a rapport with many of the folks. So had kind of call it, two separate lives within the company before and after diagnosis. So, certainly because of that, it did not impact my hiring, that never entered into the equation. But it certainly does impact the potential positions that I could move into in the type of industry that I'm currently in.
Thank you. Chris?
Hi, thank you. My name is Chris, and I am a lead software developer. I have been doing this for just about 20 years now, and I have Leber's congenital amaurosis, which is a congenital retinal disease. And for me, that manifested as me having very low vision growing up. I was able to see light and shapes. I think I kind of remember seeing colors when I was real young, but we're talking about like nursery school age. Over time, that has gradually gone away to the point where I'm totally blind, and I'm not exactly sure when that occurred, except that I started to notice signs of it when I was in my 30s. I have always been a Braille reader. I have always been a screen reader user. I've always used a cane or a guide dog for mobility. And so disclosing was never really an option or a choice for me. My visual impairment has always been quite obvious to me and everyone around me. And so I have over the years wrestled with my own discomfort with that. And I've worked hard to get to a place where now I feel pretty confident in myself and am most of the time willing to speak up for myself and advocate or explain when needed. But I'm not going to lie, it's not 100%. There's still times where I feel a little bit uncomfortable about being different. But it is what it is. I don't really have a choice.
Thank you. So talk to me a little bit about your philosophy for disclosing your disability, your vision impairment in the workplace. And this could include at job interviews too. Sorry.
So my philosophy is a lot like what you covered when you went through the slides. It is that for many of us, our visual impairment is obvious to people that are looking at us, whether we think it is or not. And therefore, I think disclosing it is better than not disclosing it, because people then understand what's going on. And if people don't understand what's going on, the explanation that they might come up with in their mind is likely to be a lot worse than the reality. I really advocate strongly for disclosing, but I also advocate for being confident in yourself. And this is a real balancing act, especially when you're applying for a job and you're going through an interview process. You're forming relationships with people that have never met you before. You've never met them before. Everybody's uncomfortable on all sides for lots of reasons that have nothing to do with disability. And throwing disability into the mix just increases that discomfort in a lot of cases, not every case. And because of that, I think that it's really important for us to be able to confidently disclose our disability, and also be able to confidently articulate the kinds of value that we're going to provide to our employers, the people that we work for, because that's really what they're looking for, especially when you're applying for a job or interviewing for a job. They want to know that they can feel confident that you're going to be able to do the job and that you're going to be able to provide them with the service that they're hiring you for. For a person that's in a situation kind of like Jeff is in, he's had the chance to build those relationships with people already. And so the way he approaches disclosure may be somewhat different, but there still needs to be quite a bit of confidence. Self-confidence, I think, is really key in any part of this process.
Thank you. Melissa, did you want to talk about your philosophy for disclosing?
I definitely agree with the self-confidence. I think that I think the more confident you are with your disability and the more open you are, like when you're going through a job interview, I just feel like most of the time it when they're looking, when they're looking for someone to fill whatever position it is, they're not going to see as much of the disability as we would think they would. Of course, I mean, I've had many times in life when I've been not so confident and had a lower self-esteem, but at the end of it, the more confidence you have, the more you can show your personality, the more you can show that, you meet the needs and the requirements that they're looking for. There's so much more to you than the disability. That's not what makes you. That's just a small part of you. And when you have that confidence and you can go in there saying, you know what, this is who I am, this is the disability I have, but I can be a huge asset to the company or, to the program or whatever it is that you're applying for. So I definitely think that, confidence and open communication is key.
Yes, I agree, because I remember there was a time when I was a teenager and I had a job, and the supervisor knew my situation, and he asked me, do you want me to tell your coworkers that you have a vision impairment? And I said no, and that was the wrong decision, because they were not understanding why I was, kind of clumsy in their mind and bumping
Yeah.
into things, and they would have been understanding, and they probably would have tried to go out of their way to assist me, or at least give me some verbal cues that would have been helpful if they had known, but they didn't know, because that was my choice. And that was a good learning experience for me to know that it was not, it is really helpful when people know around you, not just your supervisor, but even people around you. It's helpful.
Definitely.
So, Jeff, did you want to, I know you're in a
Sure.
very different situation, but talk about your philosophy related to disclosure in the workplace.
Sure. So I am in a different situation. I know for me, it wasn't all in and all out. It was a gradation. It occurred over the course of time. So basically, my philosophy is everybody is unique, everybody is different, and to me, it's truly is a case by case situation. And there's a whole lot that goes into as things change over time, when to disclose and when not to disclose. I would say this first and foremost, you absolutely have to put safety first. So there are going to be those that are going to be in situations where you may potentially be in an unsafe environment, and you may potentially put others in an unsafe environment, depending upon what you're doing. Number one, you got to put that at the forefront. So you got to take that into account. But I do know, as time goes on, there's many professions and industries where, thankfully that's not something at the forefront, whether it's working off a computer screen, a screen reader, or, reading and things that don't have that element. There's some more flexibility for folks. But I would say this, for me, and what my philosophy is, I would absolutely say being confident, being upfront and communicative as time goes on and as things change is there's no doubt about it. That creates the best outcome for everybody. Not only you, but the employer, your peers, your supervisor, and everybody. And, I think there's many folks where, your ability, your vision changes over time. It's something that you have to monitor and re-communicate and basically re-outline, what you are able to do and what you're not able to do.
Thank you. So this next question is about what techniques you have actually used when you're disclosing your vision impairment in the workplace. And like, what kinds of things have you done that have smoothed your employment experience with your vision impairment?
Should I kick it off?
Yes, go ahead.
So here's what I would say. I've got numerous items here. Number one, I would definitely kick off kind of reiterating, definitely be honest with your peers and your supervisors. And I'll get to something towards the end of the points here, but that's number one. I would say in terms of in the work environment, there's a good chance that you're not going to have, you're going to be your own expert. You're going to be your own advocate. You're going to be your own researcher. It's up to you, it's up to me to identify the external resources and training that's going to allow you to provide value to the company. It's going to allow you to, do what you need to do to demonstrate, that you're able to do your job proficiently, and take that to your supervisor. Discuss what your needs are. If you do that, I pretty much guarantee you're going to be met with resounding success. Why? Because they're going to see that you took the initiative to identify the training. They're going to see that you want to add value. They're going to be relieved that to some degree they don't have to identify the training, and they know that you're going to own it if you're going to identify it, and the company is going to fund it. Where this also really kind of builds on, from one course or one application to the next, it's really incumbent upon you to identify throughout where the training or the research that you applied yourself at learning is of value, and pointing this out to your peers, your supervisor, or others is something that they'll appreciate, because they may not necessarily pick up on how that training was putting you in a position to complete a project or to do something. Another very important aspect is plan your work ahead. Planning ahead logistically, planning ahead for the what ifs, kind of going through scenarios ahead of time before you're presenting something or before you're evaluating a project is really important. Only because the reality is that it takes more time to do certain things, with the visual impairment, and the more you can kind of clear up front, that takes a big load off your plate, as decisions are being made or as things are occurring. Another big important point is there are going to be things that you definitely need help with, so be honest about it. What I have found in so many instances where I'll go to a peer of mine, or I'll say, hey, I need a hand with something here, or need you to kind of look at the screen as I navigate through with my voice activated software. And they'll look at what you're doing and they'll be like, oh, gee, I didn't know that Outlook could do that. Or, oh, gee, I didn't know that you could do an Excel pivot table that does that. So many times your peers will learn from you by you asking them for help. So it truly is a win-win situation. And I can think of many instances where, after that happened, they're going to be like, oh, that's really cool. Hey, be sure to ask me, if something like that comes up again. Two other, I'd say, very important things is if you do have the opportunity to network with others in your company with the visual impairment, well, that's an obvious no-brainer. It may not be very easy to identify that because of HIPAA laws and everything else, but that's where you've got to get a little bit creative to try to identify those folks, if you're so fortunate to be able to do that. But there is something that you can do is outside of the company, you absolutely have so many opportunities through a variety of local groups, local organizations, National Federation of the Blind, Hadley. There's so many opportunities out there to network with others in a similar situation who may not be working with you at your company. Take advantage of those. You'll learn tremendous amounts that you'll be able to bring back to the workplace. And this is one here that I think I really want to spend a little bit of time on. Is I recently transitioned to a new position, and one of the things that I think in general, whether it's the just the work environment or just kind of the climate we live in, everybody is very aware of HIPAA and not discussing disabilities and not disclosing. When I transitioned to a new group, one of the things I did is I kind of made a point of it and I talked to my supervisor ahead of time and he supported it 100%. I actually met with my new group in, I'll say 3 subgroups. So like small groups of 4 or 5 people. And I did a meet and greet even before I came to the group. And because for the most part, there were new folks that I wasn't working with before. The meet and greet was nothing more than, hey, want to just talk a little bit about my family, hobbies, my career, and oh, by the way, my visual disability. And I went into a lot more detail than I did earlier on, but kind of went through all that, and then I set up times separately to just have one-on-ones to get to know them as well. That was very, very, I'll say very successful in the sense that I had several folks come to me and say, thanks for doing that. I really, we kind of knew something was up. We didn't know. And they got to know me. I got to know them. And it really, really put them at ease. And because of that, it's been very workable where folks aren't bashful about saying anything. They're kind of looking out for things. They know when I ask for things, it's something that I really need. And they're not playing a guessing game. So they really understand what I can and can't do. And they also understand at the end of the day, it's communication, communication, communication. If something's unclear, just ask me or I'll ask them. And then I would say the last point, use humor. I would say the biggest bridge to getting to a compatible situation is use a sense of humor, joke around, don't be bashful about your situation. I know everybody's different and it doesn't happen overnight, but I could say this, the more you jokingly, kind of take a situation like where somebody would be presenting something and say, oh, I don't like the way that looks, I'll chime in, hey, I don't see anything wrong with it, and you get a lot of chuckles, and it just, by doing that, it just puts people at ease, and then they're like, you know what, it's going to be okay. So a little bit long-winded answer, but I definitely wanted to kind of go through over the years what really has worked well.
I think those are some really valuable suggestions, Jeff. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Chris.
Oh, wow. I absolutely love what Melissa and Jeff have talked about so far. And I love Jeff's most recent answer. I'm going to probably end up repeating a lot of what he said in a different way, but I'm going to start by saying, remember that you are a part of a team and that every part of that team has a part to play and has strengths and weaknesses, and the team as a whole is usually the thing that's responsible for getting the job done. It's not all just you. And I say that because I think that we need to remind ourselves that we need help sometimes as people with disabilities, but so does everybody else. Jeff talked about learning from his coworkers, or his coworkers learning from him about how to do things with Outlook or with Excel or different pieces of software. And that happens in the workplace all the time. I have seen people walk up and down the hallway, walk into people's offices or cubicles or whatever, and ask for help because they don't know how to do something, or because they don't understand what the problem is with the software that they're working on. There's all kinds of reasons that people ask each other for help that have nothing to do with disability. And we need to give ourselves permission to be able to ask for help the same way that our peers do. We also need to give ourselves permission to be valuable. So there may be something that we are particularly strong at that fills a particular niche or a particular gap on the team. And because we have filled that particular niche or that particular gap in such a good way, we've built a relationship of respect and just the camaraderie, I guess, is the word that I'm looking for, where people are happy to help out when you need it, and you by the same token are going to be happy to help out those people when they need it from you, and they will. So techniques that have worked out really well for me, though, regarding getting accommodations that I need, or taking this back to the whole idea of disclosing disability. When I have gone into job interviews, again, I'm a software developer, so I do a lot of stuff on the computer. I early on learned that if I went into a job interview with a project that I was free to show the interviewer on my laptop, it was a good way to demonstrate my skill as a software developer, and also to demonstrate my skill with the assistive technology that I use to develop software at the same time, without having to make a digression into this is what a screen reader is. In other words, I don't necessarily bring it up. I just pull out my laptop and say, well, let me show you this project that I'm working on. And we together sit around the screen, and they hear my screen reader talking to me. They maybe see me working my Braille display, and they also see the end product of what I'm doing on the screen. And it's something that they can relate to very well. That's worked really well, but I don't stop there. Usually towards the end of an interview, even though legally interviewers are not allowed to ask us a lot of questions about our disabilities, I will, in the last, say, 5 or 10 minutes of a job interview, say, hey, do you have any questions for me about my vision? And by that time, I feel like I have built enough of a relationship with the person that I'm talking to, or the people that I'm talking to, that I may have, they may feel a little bit more comfortable with me. I may feel a little bit more comfortable with them, but I'm not leading off with that. I'm ending with that. And it's a way for me to build an even stronger relationship and get, increase our mutual level of comfort before we close out the interview. The same thing kind of works in the workplace. I will oftentimes just show people what I'm working on. If I'm doing a presentation, and if it's a group of people that I've presented to before, I don't necessarily explain it, I just do it. If it's a new group of people that I've never presented to before, I might start out by saying, I want you to know that I am totally blind. I use a text-to-speech program and Braille that help me to do my job. Sometimes that means that I may do things a little bit differently than you expect, or navigate a little bit differently than you expect. And I want you to be aware of that, in case there's something that is unexpected during this presentation where that comes up. And then I leave it there and move into the presentation and go forward. I have not been in a supervisory role per se, but I have led teams of individuals. Like Jeff, I spend a lot of time with them in small groups or one-on-one, and I really give them permission to ask me questions. But I wait until they've had a chance to learn about my life and my family and my career and my personal interests and stuff, and the disability kind of comes last, but it definitely comes. So I think I'll close there. may seem a bit repetitive, but I think that's because these are techniques that a lot of people have found to be very, very helpful in navigating the work world with visual impairment over a long period of time.
Thank you, Jeff. That was great. Melissa, do you have other things you'd like to add to what we have already heard about as far as techniques for smoothing the path within our employment situation?
Oh, wow. I don't know if they left anything out.
And if-
Honestly, I mean, it would just be repetitive. Honestly, it's just, it's all about open communication, knowing that you have a lot to offer, knowing that you have a lot to bring to the workforce or to the company, whatever it is that, you're applying for or what you're doing. Knowing that there are resources out there, don't be ashamed to use them. I don't want to get off topic, but talking about being able to be your own advocate. My son Joshua, as I told you earlier, he's legally blind also. He has a lot tougher time with confidence, with self-advocacy, with just accepting his vision loss. And so I feel like watching him, knowing the battles and the struggles that he has, it's so much better when you can be open, when you can be honest, when you can have that self-confidence, because there are so many people that do want to help, and not just help you, but you can help them. And that's what I try to explain to my son. He has so much to offer. And not just can he learn from other people, but they can learn from him. And there are so many resources out there, and there are so many different programs, like as far as software that can help with visual impairments. And Joshua has a big problem of wanting to use the accommodations that are out there. Whereas for me growing up, I wish I would have had those accommodations to use, because as time goes by, there's so much more out there than there was when I was a kid growing up in middle school.
Okay, so let's just start with the panel question here, and I'll get this in the right mode in a second. We have Chris and Jeff with us, and we want to ask them about if we could go back and do anything differently. What would you do if you had the chance to do something differently related to your vision loss and disclosing your vision loss on the job?
Okay, so in terms of what I would do differently, kind of thinking back on it, I know we talked about it throughout the presentation. There is no official playbook, and every single case is truly case by case and individual specific. But I would say probably more important than anything else is just know that if you've done your best along the way, that's all that really counts. Things are difficult enough, and it's so important to not be too hard on yourself and just really kind of, hold yourself to a standard that's unrealistic. So just, if you're doing your best and you're not too hard on yourself, be good with that. But with that in mind, I would say there were a couple things. From the time I was diagnosed, it did take me about 6 years to finally learn the voice-activated software. So I primarily used the JAWS software. And then it actually took me 10 years to start using the white cane in public. So again, a lot goes into timing and decisions and when to use the tools. But looking back on it, I could say those years were extremely stressful. And, I think about things I did to kind of compensate. I would, do the reverse contrast on the computer, look at making the font thicker, a little bit bolder, and I did a lot of reading for my position. I would go home from work and I would be physically exhausted just from reading all day. So that was something, kind of looking back on it, hey, I wish I would have given that a little bit more consideration earlier on, and perhaps would have made things a little bit easier. And then similarly with the white cane, using the cane, very, very similar point with that as well. But again, it's retrospect, it's hindsight, and as time goes on and you kind of see the different ways in which you can navigate and take advantage of technology, I really encourage everybody to do that.
Thank you, Jeff. Chris?
Yeah, I find myself wanting to echo everything Jeff says because it's right on. For myself, I wish that I had gotten involved in the blind community a lot earlier in life. I knew about things like ACB and NFB, but I really didn't get involved in them heavily until the last few years of my when I was in my late 30s or early 40s. And some of that felt like I didn't have enough time because I had a young family and a busy career and stuff going on. And some of it was that I frankly felt uncomfortable about being blind, and I wanted to be around sighted people. I didn't want to be around blind people all the time. I regret that now very, very deeply, because there's tons of blind people that I've been able to learn some wonderful things from, and I might have been able to learn those a lot sooner had I gotten more involved earlier on. Because of that lack of involvement, because I was uncomfortable with myself, I tended to really heavily de-emphasize my blindness. Like I said earlier, I couldn't really ever not disclose it because everybody knows when I walk into a room that I'm blind. But I would try to make a point of avoiding talking about it, not telling people about it. I worked remotely for 10 years, and I led some teams of software developers in the United States and also in a couple of other countries, India and Romania. And a lot of the interaction with those people was done over the phone or over audio chats or text. And I didn't need to talk about my blindness in a lot of circumstances with those people, so I just didn't. And that came back to bite me when I went to Romania to do some on-site training and learned that they all knew I was blind. They talked about it amongst themselves and kind of wondered how I was able to do my job and stuff with a visual impairment. And they were very curious and very accepting of me when I got there. But I recall feeling that maybe I let them down a little bit by not allowing them to get to know me and satisfy their curiosity a little bit earlier. And I really did find that after that sort of wall between us was broken down, I was able to form stronger relationships with those people, and I still have some friendships with the people that I worked with today. And that's, I guess, what I would really tie it back to is that if you're uncomfortable with your own blindness and you're not willing to talk about it and be a little bit vulnerable once in a while, that is putting a barrier between you and your coworkers that weakens your relationship with them.
Thank you, Chris. That's a really valuable thing to share, and I appreciate you being willing to talk about that. I have a few resources I just wanted to mention, and then we'll move into the questions that have been being typed into the chat box. I wanted to talk about our Career Advantage. It's a free online course you can take through the NRTC, and there's information in that course about disability disclosure. I also found information at the Job Accommodation Network website. They have a lot of great helpful hints about disclosing your vision or disclosing a vision loss for the job. And also the Department of Labor had some information. You can find a lot more information online. Those are just a few examples of the things that I found. And that's all I have. Cantrice, do you want to read us some questions?
So one question is, what would you say to young people who are resistant in using their accommodations?
I would say, first of all, I understand, and you're not alone. Many of us feel uncomfortable and we don't want to stand out Sometimes we don't want to do things differently because we don't want to stand out. But and sometimes we feel like we might not need to. But remember what Jeff said about going home from work at the end of the day physically exhausted because he was struggling to read his screen and so forth. These accommodations will make you a better worker. They'll make you a more efficient worker, and that's going to make you more valuable to your employer. And that's one reason to use them. But another reason to use them is, do you really want to live your life struggling all the time? There are so many areas that we will end up struggling in that we don't have any control over. So why would we want to intentionally add this struggle onto the struggles that we already have?
Yeah, and I would wholeheartedly agree with Chris's comments for sure. Totally understand, especially as a younger person, it's I think even more difficult. But I could say this: it doesn't get easier. So punting the decision to use that technology and use the tools, the cons definitely outweigh the pros. So I would strongly suggest for young folks to identify with an older mentor who is visually handicapped, and get advice from that person, get some one-on-one advice from that person, confide with that person, and really think about how much better your life could be by using the tools and using accessibility. Another aspect of this too is at an early age, you'll have the benefit of screening out who really matters to you. And if people really diss you because you're using these tools, well, I hate to tell you, those are probably people you don't want to be friends with for the long term. So, not that you want to remove yourself from circles of friends or anything, but you'll get some insight into what really makes up people when you start to use your tools.
Thank you. I see a question. It might have just come to me, Cantrice. One or two people were asking if there were ever any situations where you disclosed your vision impairment and it was not a good situation, that you wish you hadn't disclosed it. I
could respond. From my perspective, for me personally, it's all been positive. Being honest, right from, shortly thereafter the diagnosis, had the communication. I was able to, I was not legally blind when I was diagnosed, but I did disclose. I was upfront. I was honest. Let them know this is something that's going to have to be monitored and discussed with my management, and keep communication going to keep them apprised of any changes and of the situation, and if there are any accommodation needs. So from my perspective, me personally, it's been very, very beneficial and the right thing to do from a communication perspective. So no, nothing bad came from that.
It is positive most of the time, and it's so much of the time it's positive when it works out, that I really do advocate hard for being open and honest and being proud of who you are. However, let's be real, there is discrimination that occurs. I went into a job interview once that was a two-phase interview. I met with a contracting company representative, and then they kind of did a 15-20 minute screening of me followed by the interview. And when I started that screening process, she kept repeating over and over again, I don't know how this is going to go. When somebody's saying that to you, that they're basically unsure of you during a job interview, that is very, very disheartening. And unfortunately, that stuff happens. But in my case, not disclosing wouldn't have helped because I don't have a choice. And we can point to situations where people haven't disclosed and they've been clumsy and someone thought they were drunk or high. And so, remember what I said, and Kendra also said a variation of this in the video. The reality is usually not as bad as what's in somebody's imagination. You certainly don't want someone to discriminate against you because they think you're drunk or high, when maybe they won't, if they realize that it's just because you don't see very well.
I agree, Chris. I like that answer. Someone else is asking about any suggestions for disclosing in a virtual interview, if you have any specific suggestions for that.
So I've played around with this a little bit, and I'll also say that in my job, I have also made hiring decisions or been involved in making hiring decisions. So I see both sides of this. During a virtual interview, you sometimes can avoid disclosing. I've had interviews that were just over the phone, and I have chosen not to disclose during those interviews and to put that disclosure off as long as possible. But then there are also video interviews where you may or may not have a choice. What I would say is, I don't think we're asking the right question. I think disclosing is the right thing to do. I think what really is more important is how we go about it. Can we confidently find the right time? Say, you need to know now that I'm blind because, and this is, if I'm going to do like a screen share, or if I'm going to show somebody how I'm doing something in a virtual interview, I will disclose right there, because the way that I navigate looks different, because I use a screen reader than it would if someone were using a mouse. And I want people to understand what they're looking at right up front. I don't spend a lot of time on it, and I certainly don't make a big deal of it, because I know that is going to be an uncomfortable conversation for me and for the other person. And I want them to know as quickly as possible that I'm comfortable with it, and I want them to be comfortable with it also.
So as far as the virtual disclosure, this is not related to employment, but I was calling on the phone to get some assistance the other day. And I tried a couple of times because I wanted to do a three-way call to call in my coworker to help me with the question that we were trying to ask, because it was something online that we were trying to navigate. And I was having trouble initiating the three-way call. And so finally I called back like the third time because I got disconnected. And instead of taking my other approach where I just said, hang on a second, I need to try and get my coworker on this call, which was the first thing I basically said to the person that answered the phone. I said, hey, I'm blind and I really want my coworker to be part of this conversation. Give me a minute while I try to initiate this three-way call. And the person on the other end said, I can initiate it for you. What's the phone number? And they actually then successfully helped me because I disclosed. And so speaking of virtual and, people not knowing the situation, I think that honesty really is the best option, that you want to let people know the real situation. And I think people in their hearts really want to be helpful. And so they can't be helpful if they don't understand what you're struggling with. All right. There was another question about, was that you, Cantrice? Can you read the question that you had sent to you?
Sure. That question is, what would be helpful to encourage individuals to use assistive technology or a white cane?
I would say, certainly talking to folks that have been using the assistive technology, the cane, talk about how their quality of life has increased. So again, I think it's always good through some local support groups or through the community to try to get linked up with an individual who has been using the tools, or if there's somebody you can network with, on behalf of that person to really demonstrate the benefits. I know I'm involved in a few groups, and I hear some of my peers have just raved about guide dogs, and I don't have a guide dog. And when I hear everybody talk about it, I think, wow, that sounds really cool. So exposing the person to people that are using the tools is the best thing. And then I think what they'll see through what others are talking about and how they perceive the benefits that others are getting, they're going to want to start using the tools.
Yeah, and I think helping them maybe make a list of pros and cons, like what's good about what you're doing now, and why would you not want to do something more efficiently or effectively? One of the things that happened to me when I started using a white cane is when I would go to the grocery store, people would come up and say, "Hey, can I help you find something?" Because they saw me looking for something on the shelf. And, that didn't happen when I didn't use a white cane. And if I needed help, I'd have to go find somebody and get them to assist me. And so I think we don't realize all the benefits of things that can happen, and talking to others that use the tools really helps to open your eyes to it. But maybe even encouraging them, I don't know, I've never tried this theory, but asking them to like take a week and use the tool versus not using the tool, and then have a discussion about, what was better, what was frustrating about it, because did the things that they thought were going to happen to them? Like a lot of, I've heard individuals say to me, well, I'm afraid if I use the white cane that people are, it makes me more of a target. People are going to take advantage of me. And so if you can say, well, hey, why don't you use it for a week, and then let's have a discussion about it, then you can make a decision. Like, don't make your decision before you've tried it for at least a week or two, because it starts to open your eyes to how, yes, it's uncomfortable. There's that adjustment period of, I feel different. I feel like everyone's looking at me. But once you are honest and say, hey, look, that person came up and just offered me help, and I really needed it at that moment, and I didn't have to go figure out who was going to help me with that thing, those benefits come out. So how would you deal with someone who's going to treat you differently after you disclose? Any thoughts about that, Jeff?
I would say, depending upon how, what the personal relationship is, obviously have a conversation with them and try to understand from their perspective why, they would feel differently about you or treat you differently. And again, that really boils down to really the relationship that you have with that person, how close you are to them, or, if they're just an acquaintance at work. Because that's true. I mean, you do get the overwhelming majority of folks are going to be accommodating and helpful and understand. And then you will definitely pick up on folks that, may not view it the same way. And again, I think you really got to kind of, at that point, then kind of make some decisions. Is that relationship really worth having? Depending upon who it is or what it is, and if it's necessary or not. But I would say start from trying to understand where their negative perception might be, and then use analogies. So just compare it to a different situation that they might be in, or that somebody that they might know might be in that they didn't choose to be in. So that's the thing. We're in a position that we didn't choose to be here. We're in a position where we're trying to make things better. So I think once you try to do that, perhaps things will smoothen out, but you'll know a lot more after that conversation.
So yeah, I mean, I think that you're right about that, Jeff. And someone else is asking or stating that they're adjusting to low vision. Let me see if I can find that exactly.
While you're looking for that, Kendra, I have another question that was sent to me directly. And that question is, what resources do you access to find a mentor who does similar work as you?
Oh, that's a great question. The person that I kind of use who has been my mentor was actually the lady that taught me the voice activated software when I first learned it. And she has been an unbelievable resource to me to open the doors to whatever it is, whether it's other groups, listservs, different tools, different things to think about. He's just a great person to joke with. But in terms of very specific to what you're doing, to me, the best way to do that is to get involved with any sort of a local group, a local group where the theme is visual disabilities, whether it's like Lighthouse for the Blind or something through Hadley. I know there's a lot of virtual groups. I know it's, that's one site, the Hadley website, is recommended to me, and I would agree with it. That's kind of the one-stop shop for a lot of the tools. There's a lot of ways to be able to network through that organization, or say through the National Federation of the Blind, to try to get networked with others that are similar to what you're doing things similar to what you're doing, and are in a similar situation. The reality, though, is, and Chris mentioned that, and I agree earlier on, as you're kind of navigating through everything, you're, dealing with, families, jobs, and you want to be able to have, some time to do things that you want to do. It is hard to juggle all those balls. So that's where these resources like Hadley and National Federation of the Blind and local user groups can really help accelerate you getting to a solution.
Right.
And then I would encourage too to within the company, just be open about your situation and see if they're aware of any others, whether it's your supervisor, somebody in IT, or even somebody within within your group.
Those are good suggestions. There's also Career Connect. They used to have mentors, but I don't think they're connecting people anymore. So, but you could check on their website to see. It's with the American Printing House for the Blind called Career Connect. So David was asking about his new vision loss and that he's concerned that his productivity is slipping because his reading is slower, etc. And, just being concerned about that, what can he do? And I'm going to answer this one and just suggest that you consider moving to screen reader and audio formats, because that definitely increases your speed. I got to the place where magnification was just going slower and slower, and I thought, well, what can I actually increase? Can I increase my print reading speed? No, there's no way to do that anymore. So I either have audio or I could work on my Braille reading speed, and that's when I really started working on Braille to try to increase that reading speed. So I had another alternate in addition to the audio. So, those are your alternates, and they take a while to get used to them. So starting slowly will help. So I want to wrap this up. There might be a few more questions that we missed, and I apologize. I thank you for those of you who have stuck with us this afternoon. And thank you so much, Jeff, for spending an extra few minutes with us answering questions today.